Hey all, and thank you for coming again. We're now in the final event of the week, so I want to welcome you all. I hope everyone's had a fantastic week. We have some tie-ins in the industry here to just talk to you about accessibility and, really exciting news. So again, welcome everybody. So excited to have you join us. And so, once again, greetings, family. I want to present to you Define All Odds, which is our month of where we talk about accessibility in the tech space and how we can continue to provide inclusion. On today, we have a very special panel for you all to really get y'all involved. And thankfully, because we're dealing with so many great members, I'm not going to be handling it alone. I actually have my CEO, Javon, with me, and she's coming on stage now.
Hey everyone, what's going on? Happy Friday to everyone. My name is Javon. I am the COO of Mentor Me Collective. I'm so happy to be here. So excited for you guys to join us.
Oh, we're definitely excited to have you back here. Jovi, that's my girl right there. I talk about her all the time. She does excellent work, and I'm so excited to see her. She hasn't been here for a minute, but she's back again. Allow her to reintroduce herself.
Yes, y'all, yes.
So once again, just greetings from us. If you can take a moment to just share with us, whether that's on your LinkedIn, your Instagram, your Twitter, your YouTube, your Snapchat, whatever social media platform you got, just share because we're really getting into some exciting talks today. And of course, as I said, we're celebrating Accessibility Awareness Month with some of the greatest technologists that we have in the game right now. And so before we get into that, I just want to ask you all where you all are in your journey. In school, boot camp, or self-learning? Are you applying for your first role, or are you growing and glowing in your career? We want you to know here that no matter where you are supported, you are loved, and we want to make sure we're helping you on that journey in any way we can. And one of those ways is with the talks we decide to have.
Absolutely.
And see, that's my G right there. And so I want to talk to you a little bit before we get into the titles about our referral zone. That's right, y'all. We have a referral zone. People have reached out from these companies because they're seeking to hire. And as you know, when you cold apply, you're in the sea of millions, not millions, but thousands and thousands of people. And so we want to do our part to help you get those interviews, get those job offers. And one of those ways we do that is with our referral zone. We have Microsoft. Even though that says Atlanta, they're hiring all over the place. We have Zillow, we have Amazon, we have Resilia, Netflix, and many more. So please take a moment to just take a look. There's so many jobs coming available right now. And once again, you'll visit bit.ly/MMC-refers, and please check that out. So before we get into more, I just want to introduce you to the team. I want to talk to you a little about our mentorship program, how to opt into our text reminders, a little bit about our Etsy shop, and finally about our Accessibility Month giveaway. So welcome all. Again, that's Chanel P, Miss Make It Happen herself. She's the reason we can put on these events. She has so many connections. And the dopest thing about her, she wants to help the community. This is why she does this. She wants you all to succeed. So she's really going out her way to make sure we have access to all this. We're so thankful for her. I'll let Jovi introduce herself.
Of course. Thanks, Dom. Again, I'm the COO of Mentor Me Collective. I'm a software engineer by day and content creator. I handle all of the day-to-day operations. So again, I'm so happy to be here. And then Dom, you could introduce
I'm Mr.
yourself.
Phil, and I want to make sure that everyone is looking good and glowing in themselves. And so, I'm just here to make them all look good, but I handle all the back end work and just making sure our strategy and how we reach you all are always up to date. And then we have Brooklyn, who is our community and impact manager. She's a lot of the events we have came from her ideas, so super dope. She's really, really personable. We love her to death, but that's not all. We have Sade, who is our graphic designer. As I've said, every time I've shown this slide, dope designs. If you go in our Etsy shop, she designed everything there. Straight fire. We have Kiara, who is our event content curator / DJ / everything really. She comes up with the questions. She helps host. She does a lot for us. And then we have Sharika, who's our user experience engineer. The lifestyle page that we have on our site is all designed by her. She does it all. Just a fantastic woman. And maybe you want to join us. Maybe you want to volunteer. So if you go to the link down here, bit.ly / MMC-T, you can select the volunteer inquiry with me or Javon. We'll be happy to get to know you, interview you, and see where we can fit you in. And so I want to also talk about our mentorship program. We know how hard it is to be in these industries when you're not sure where to go. And so we want to help you with that. And one of the ways we do that is with mentorship. We have people who are already in the positions that you want to be in, and they're willing to give their knowledge, willing to give their expertise, and willing just to get to know you and do what they can to help you get these jobs. So please take the time, join the fellowship program, and you can go to the link right here, which is bit.ly / MMC-Menti. Apologies for that. Ooh. But I'm really excited about this program because this is one of the things that we pride ourselves on. We really want to help you all in any way that we can with community. And so this is how you opt into our text reminders. You'll text MMC to 866-901-1914. We're not going to spam you all. We just want to tell you about our giveaways. We just want to text you about our events and any updates that we have. Now, remember when I said Sade and all the stuff that she does for us? That's on our Etsy shop right here. And you can see that at etsy.com /shop /Mentor Me Collective. Again, every single design we have on there, she has done, and she has been spectacular. So please check that out. Like some of her accessibility designs have been crazy, fire. Chanel just dropped some fire emoji. Let me show that. You see that? We have so much going on. But what's an MMC without a MMC giveaway? That's right, y'all. We always seek to give back to the community, and one of those ways is through, just free giveaways. We have a bevy of stuff that we want to give to you. But before we get into that, we would like y'all to take a picture on our virtual photo booth. Grab a pen and paper because there might just be a quiz. You never know. Connect with us on your social media platforms, and then complete our online quiz. And so again, this is just a little further in depth, but you see your smartphone, we all have one. You're going to scan that QR code right there. Take it. Please, 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 please. Scan it. We pay for this virtual booth and we want y'all to use it. There's some dope filters who have also been designed by Sade. That girl is talented, y'all. And so we also, again, want you to complete the online quiz when we have it. Visit our Instagram and post and tag 3 of your friends. And finally, text MMC to 866-901-1914. This is just a code. If you're on your computer, you can go and get that code right there. bit.ly /MMC-5. I'll leave this up for a quick second.
I'm trying to take my selfie now.
Take it out, like I said.
Let me tell y'all, if y'all don't feel camera ready, what you do is you go and you take an old selfie and you can upload an old selfie. That's what I usually do,
See, she giving y'all the little details already. Y'all better be taking notes. That girl fire. So these are just some of the giveaway prizes that we have. We have Apple AirTags. Those just came out. We have a HomePod Mini, the Hydrate water bottle, and some Nowly smart light bulbs. Again, all free. Just enter the quiz. What do you have to lose? You have nothing to lose and everything to gain. But again, you didn't come to hear me talk and chat all this time. You're here for the real people. This is why y'all signed up for the event. So I'll be the first to introduce. We have our first guest up here, Miss Katie Wainwright.
Yes. Hi. Hey, Katie.
Nice to see you all. I'm Katie. I'm a user experience researcher at Google, and I lead an accessibility research team to make sure that products across the company are more accessible.
I love that. And I'm going to introduce Maureen. Hey, Maureen.
Hi, everyone. I apologize if my background noise is a little much, but I'm happy to be here. I work in the same vicinity as Katie. I'm at Google for UX research on accessibility for internal tools for employees.
Awesome.
Oh, that's amazing. That's awesome. And so I also want to bring up another individual that y'all excited to see, Aki. How you doing?
Hey everybody, I'm a software engineer on Chrome OS accessibility. Been at the company for 3.5 years. Joined straight out of school. So hopefully I have a good perspective to share today.
Awesome. Thank you for coming. And last but not least, we have NM. Hey.
Hey everybody, I'm so excited to be here. My name's NM. I'm a technical program manager at Google, and I lead web and mobile accessibility standards there. I was also a software engineer until recently on the Google Docs accessibility team, so I can answer questions about both fields.
Oh, that's amazing. And
Oh,
so
we love
before we get in deeper, can y'all just take a moment to introduce yourselves with your pronouns so that the audience can make sure they're addressing y'all in the correct way?
Cool, I can take that off. So my pronouns are they, them.
Okay.
Go ahead, Katie.
She, her.
Yep, he, him.
Oh, Maureen, what are your pronouns?
My pronouns are she, her. Thanks.
Awesome. Awesome.
So once again, thank y'all all again for showing up. Time is that resource that we never get back. So thank you for choosing to give some of your time to our audience. They very much appreciate it. As you can clearly see, Chanel has said, drop some emojis. We have Jessica who has dropped some emoji. Yes, Katie, as she said, a lot of support here. So we want to make sure that y'all know that you are supported, and we just, we're really happy. So let's start this off something small, something light, as I like to say. Like, what does it look like in your day-to-day at your job?
I'll start off with that. My day-to-day as a researcher, I work on a foundational horizontal team, which means that I do not work on a specific product, but instead I do foundational research of what does it mean to have a disability and try to use a product or try to use settings or hardware. And then I go around to different teams and I try to convince them, hey, you need to make your product better. It's not accessible for this group, or here's ways that you can be thinking about accessibility for your product. So it's a lot of doing foundational research and then going and kind of hustling to other teams and convincing them to care.
Oh, I love that.
Love it.
That's a good lead into what I do, hustling to other teams and convincing them to care. In my TPM role, I lead all content changes to Google's web and mobile internal accessibility standards. So I kind of get to touch every product at Google in some way. I'm partnering with product teams to evolve those guidelines. I'm factoring in external accessibility standards, doing our own research. All those little pieces that go into that program, I get to oversee the day-to-day of that. So my actual random day in the life, lots and lots of meetings, so many meetings, scheduling more meetings. It's a lot of kind of soft power work, right? Like getting people to be on board. But the other half is, setting up those sorts of studies with researchers, that sort of concrete hard skill things too. It's a mix of everything.
Wow.
I love that.
I guess I can go next. It varies day to day, but typically, meetings sometimes in the morning. I guess today I actually had a meeting with a UX researcher and talked about some of the accessibility feedback that they gathered for a certain product, and talked about, the bugs and, how we want to address those. A little later, writing design docs. That's always a thing that software engineers have to do. And then lastly, obviously coding. You have to implement and do the actual work. So I did a little bit of coding on the dictation, voice typing and editing feature on Chrome OS today.
Awesome. And my day-to-day, basically, it more looks like a 4-month-long sprint of research. So you're building the research, then executing and testing products with persons with disabilities. And after that, you provide product teams with all their feedback. And the hope is that they take those changes and incorporate it into their workflow and make products more accessible for Googlers.
Oh, that's awesome. 4-month-long sprint.
4 weeks, I'm sorry, 4 weeks sprints.
Oh.
It's under like a month long.
Okay. I was like, maybe she's
So
exaggerating.
it's a lot
but...
of rapid change going on, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I want to lean into a little bit about some of the projects you guys work on. Like, what are some like really innovative projects that you guys have seen for accessibility? You could just popcorn that, whoever wants to hop in first.
I recently, really thoroughly enjoyed a study that I just did that incorporated accessibility testing at the very early phase of design, so at the prototype stage. And usually you're doing a lot of accessibility testing at the end when something is fully formed. So when you're getting ideas and input from people with disabilities early on, I feel like that saves teams so much time, and you're able to nip those bugs and issues that would happen later on at the forefront of the project. So that was something I was really excited for.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
I think one of the interesting things that I see at Google, but also at other companies, is that there's this really difficult balance of getting teams to kind of catch up with accessibility and say like, okay, you have products that are already built, but are they accessible? And like, how can you go in and, make those changes and fixes, and balancing that with the innovation that should be happening and saying, hey, we can't just, keep playing catch up our whole life. We have to really innovate and make things better and not just rely on kind of the same old model that we've had. And so I think there's that balance that we kind of probably all in this room walk of trying to figure out how to do that and what ways we can really be moving the needle forward.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know for me as a software engineer, I will admit that sometimes that's not at the forefront of what I do. So I have to constantly, be reminded of certain things, and then it would suck to launch a product and then you get all these different things coming back about it's not accessible. So that's really, that was really, I understand completely that pain point.
And I think that's so common too, right? You hit on a really good point of, it's so important to be thinking about accessibility from the start, right? And really kind of, even if you guys put a sticky note on your laptop, it just says it in the corner, right? But something, it's so much, even for your own sake as an engineer too, right? Mm-hmm. It's so much easier to, bake accessibility into the mix than trying to tack it on with glue and string at the end. Yeah, and actually that kind of ties into my role too, because in accessibility standards, we're trying to lay out an actual framework for products to be able to, meet certain standards from the start.
Yeah. Aki, didn't Chrome OS just launch some cool new stuff?
Yeah. I mean, Chrome OS, we recently launched, again, dictation, voice typing, and editing. So we used to have a feature where you could type with your voice, but it was just, again, it would just type what you say and nothing else. But we recently launched some editing commands as well, and a cool new UI. So yeah, that was really awesome. Live captions on Chrome is another big one. Any content in the browser, you can flip on live caption and it will use like a speech recognition model to turn the audio into text. So cool. Those are a few big ones. And yeah, definitely really exciting to see.
And I think y'all touched on a really good point, and I think everybody who we had this week touched on this point in various ways. Like, accessibility needs to be something that we think of at the start. Like, I'll use Lyft, for example. And recently they started, when you request a Lyft driver, they'll let you know, like, hey, your driver may be hard of hearing, he prefers to text. And it's kind of like, why wasn't that thought of at the start? Because when we talk about inclusion, it's not necessarily just about race, but it's about people of various others, backgrounds and everything. So I guess like a follow-up question is like, how do we go about really engaging in that conversation and starting to lead, like when a project just starts, how do we say, hey, while we're doing this, can we think about these groups of people or these groups of people?
Yeah, I think that probably all of us have different angles that we take, because it matters so much where the team is at and like what's their journey in accessibility. There are some teams I've partnered with where they're like, how do you even spell accessibility? Like, what are you talking about right now? And then there's some teams that are like, I'm here because I have to be here because, you know, someone told me I should think about this. And then there's some teams that are like, I'm all in. We just don't know how to do it ourselves. And so we need help. And so there's a lot of people kind of at different places. And so really figuring out how to meet them where they're at and their accessibility journey is really key. But I really like to talk about the curb cut effect and really say how when we think about improving the experience for folks with disabilities, we're really improving it for everyone, right? Like closed captions, like Aki was just saying, is like, it was created for folks who are deaf or hard of hearing, but like I use closed captions for literally everything, mostly because like I'm always snacking on things. And so I like need to like get content over the sound of my own chewing, right? But like we all use closed captions. And so really trying to make teams understand how it's relatable and how it's going to improve their entire product, because sometimes cross-functional stakeholders can really get caught in this like, oh, accessibility is such this like niche thing, or it's this small group and we don't need to worry about it, or it's not the priority. But really saying like, no, this will make your product better for all users, and so you should bake it in from the start. But what do other people think?
I find that the most useful thing, like, yes, totally with you, Katie, talking about the curb cut effect is especially good leverage for, like you said, executives, right, who are kind of thinking of accessibility as a niche thing. But for on the ground folks, like the actual people implementing these changes, if you can get people to understand that this is the difference between your product being unusable for an entire portion of people, as opposed to just like a nice to have, right? Like if your product isn't accessible, you are participating in exclusion, right? Like that is, if it's been brought to your attention and you're making the choice not to prioritize accessibility, like that's ableism. Like there's a word for that, right? And it's not something you want to participate in. So even just grabbing off the internet stories of disabled people, you know, writing their own first-person accounts of digital inaccessibility can be a really powerful tool to actually making folks understand. I mean, I have multiple sclerosis, and that impacts me in a whole bunch of different ways. I use different assistive tech, like select to speak, closed captions, things like that. So I can pull from my own experience. But if you don't have that, there's plenty of disabled people who have written about their frustrations on the internet for this purpose in the end, right? To make things better.
Yeah, and even letting teams know, like, people with disabilities do use your products. I think there's that like weird misconception that like, oh, if someone's blind, they probably don't need to take a photo, but like that's so incorrect, right? Like they have all the same needs, all the same wants, all the same user journeys with products that people without disabilities have. And so yeah, like NM said, and excluding them is like offensive for one, but then also you're creating barriers that don't need to be there.
I'll just chime in real fast on this one. You know, one thing that really helps, at least on my team, is we actually have a lot of people with blindness, low vision, and various disabilities that work on the product. And I think that's like so important, because if you have a bunch of people who, you know, again, are very detached from it, or just don't understand it or can't relate, like you're going to get a product, or the likelihood that you get a product that's not accessible is much higher. But again, we have people who have blindness, who have low vision, who are working on these things. And it's just so important to have the representation, I think, like on the teams that are building this stuff.
Yes, totally.
This is all good. And also, just because I want to get our audience involved, Jessica said closed captions is also great for neurodivergent folks too, which is also very important.
Totally.
And so, you know, I want to take a pause from our questions because Sarah actually had one, and I want to make sure the audience is involved. So Sarah Wood said, thanks. Sometimes making products accessible for some disability creates an inaccessibility for others. How do you balance the different types of disabilities and their needs?
From a technical perspective, settings. You know, like let the user pick what setting works for them. You know, there's definitely... Sarah hit on a really good point, right? That is a common thing, right? Conflicting access needs is legit. And unfortunately, when you bring that up, sometimes it can make people balk against the concept of accessibility. Like, oh, this is so hard. Like, if we can't make this work, if we're still going to have people telling us that they can't access this, like, what's the point? People can throw their hands up in the air. But, you know, is on a technical level, if you're talking to engineers, that's their job, is to figure it out. But on a surface level, just as a technical answer, like, settings is the option that a lot of products will go to.
I think too, there's an important distinction that could be made here of like, truly when is an experience inaccessible for someone and it attempts to be accessible for someone else, versus, hopefully there's no designers in this room who are going to come at me, but sometimes I hear designers say like, well, my designs can't be pretty and accessible. And so like really challenging, like, are you actually like, you know, making accessible designs, or are you just worried about like your design or the journey that you had in mind or the user flow that you had in mind? And so making sure that stakeholders and partners understand that difference.
Yeah,
That's a really good point.
Yeah, I agree with those both points. And lastly, I think just making sure that the products work well together. Again, like just making sure that, for example, a screen reader can work well with closed captioning, right? Like allowing users to mix and match the accessibility features they need, hopefully will give control and power to the user.
Yes, totally. I feel like we see that so much, especially when I've done research like with students. They'll have so many different features turned on to help them read and write and comprehend stuff on their laptops. And so features aren't just being used in isolation, but do have to play really well together. And I think that's something we also often overlook is how does this whole ecosystem go together?
That's real.
That
I
is
love
true.
that.
And Lisa, yesterday, I don't know if y'all caught her session, but she actually had a section where she talked about text in the backgrounds, and she had like, I want to say a bright turquoise background with white text, and she said, you're not thinking of your users, because what if somebody's colorblind, what if somebody can't see? Like, how are you going to, when you design something, don't just take aesthetics into, you know, the equation, take functionality into the equation. Can I reach the most people with this? So I'm happy that y'all chose to highlight that point.
Yeah, especially folks with low vision, folks without low vision are going to struggle to see that contrast, and folks with low vision literally just won't perceive text to be there, which is, you know, then they're missing the whole content.
Yeah, it's missing a lot. And even Jessica, she was like building off of Sarah's questions. How do you decide when to launch features automatically toggle on versus off? I think sometimes accessibility features, discoverability may be an issue.
There's layers here.
Yeah, I can see Aki's brain going though.
Oh man, I just feel like, yeah, it's honestly the discoverability issue is something that I feel very like closely, because like when I got on the team that I work on, like again, I didn't know anything about any of the accessibility features, and had I not had the resources, literally my teammates who built them, I feel like I'd have a hard time figuring out how they work, or even where they are, how to turn them on. And so, yeah, I think a big part of it is, again, like, I feel like being smart and, again, like notifying the user and using technology to try to infer if the user would potentially need an assistive technology, tutorial stuff, again, like having that built in and having all that content there so that the user doesn't have to go scrambling across, you know, multiple websites to figure out how to use it. But again, it's all right there. It explains how to use the tool. Yeah, those are some things that I noticed, and definitely some things that I've worked on in my time on my team.
Yeah, and I can give an example too. So when I was a software engineer, I mentioned I was on the Docs accessibility team, Google Docs. So Google Docs has a separate mode, like a screen reader mode and a braille display mode if you're interacting with Google Docs with the screen reader. So Google Docs will actually announce in a way that is imperceptible if you're not using a screen reader, but will be announced to screen reader users the actual keyboard shortcut that needs to be pressed to turn on that mode. So if that mode is not turned on, and you open the Google Doc, then you will hear or you will read, if you're using a braille display, what the actual keyboard shortcut is. So there are ways that you can make these settings more discoverable, but you know, Aki hit on it again, like it's there's layers here. This is unfortunately, it's not an easy question, and it really is a feature by feature basis. There's a lot of considerations here, and it's something that it's a heck of a challenge.
Yeah, it's a big challenge. I think that's one area where we could really use a lot of innovation. So if anybody wants to come work with me on the research team and do some foundational research, make some best practices for discoverability, that would be super cool. I have seen some really cool innovation lately from a few talks at like Kai and some other conferences where they have tried to use like smart features, like Aki was saying, to actually interpret and give suggestions. I think one of them was like when you use your finger to gesture on an iOS, it could tell based on your movement patterns and say like, hey, you know, I think that you need these settings, or I think that maybe you should go chat with a doctor. Like you might have Parkinson's, you have like symptoms of, you know, motor movement. And so what I think there's kind of an ethical medical discussion to be had in there, but it's really cool technology, right? To think about how can we be paying attention to what users do and how we can help adapt to them rather than forcing users to go into settings and try to figure it all out themselves, which can be really overwhelming.
I really do love that thought, Katie. Thanks so much for that. Because I'm just thinking to myself of all the other times when I've struggled using an app and I'm not considered to be like disabled. I'm completely like able-bodied. So I can only imagine how frustrating it must be, you know, for someone else. And by the way, y'all, that was a plug. She said, if you want to go work on her team with her, okay, somebody needs to pick up on those context clues.
You better drop your LinkedIn right now.
Yeah, run over to LinkedIn. Yeah, so I just want to lean into a little bit more about some of the resources you guys use. Like, what are some resources that you guys use to keep your techniques kind of like up to date and relevant? Do you have like a specific platform that you guys lean on, or like a specific source? What do you guys do?
I personally love. Oops, sorry, Katie.
Go for it.
Yes, as a UX researcher, my UX research colleagues are all pretty nerdy, and they all get together and on Meetup, Meetup.com, you'll find so many events where people come and teach or just discuss on topics of accessibility and overall UX. So just try to go on there and see if any talks interest you. That's where I first started learning about the topic and teaching myself.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good external resources like WCAG and I use LinkedIn a lot too because people share really good content. So I just find accessibility folks who are like deep into the accessibility world and share really cool content. And then at Google specifically, we have like our own internal way that we've tried to just make all of those external guidelines easier. And so we try to create internal resources too to just help spread the message of accessibility across the company, which I think is really helpful because there are a lot of people that it's just accessibility is brand new and they're, you know, really need to learn from the ground up. And so, yeah, we have those tools.
Yeah, I mean, Katie mentioned WCAG, so Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. In my role in accessibility standards, I have to, you know, stay up to date on what they're doing, what's even going on in their working group meetings when they haven't pushed a new guideline yet. So I actually have a hold on my calendar, half hour every Friday to go and read their meeting notes, right? So if you can find those professional organizations that are at the top of really whatever you want to do, if they're big enough, a lot of them will publish their notes, and that's a really good way to kind of stay ahead of the curve too. Frankly, also, I think that disability Twitter is amazing. And there's a lot of really, you know, awesome hashtags to follow and people to follow, just to listen to. I really strongly feel that, you know, accessibility, you can't do accessibility well if you're not listening to disabled people. So, you know, really plugging yourself into those communities, like even if you're not a part of the disability community, just listening, right? Like, who are you following on Twitter? There's a lot of really amazing disability justice advocates out there who are talking about their own experiences and their own issues they're running into and their own ideas on how to make things better. And that's just, yeah, it's another, well, how can I phrase this? A lot of people feel like it's a separate, that disability is kind of a separate field from accessibility, which doesn't make any sense to me. You know, I'm actually getting my disability studies master's because it's that important to me to kind of, you know, stay up to date and really understand the entire community. Thank you. The entire community that I'm building for. So, you know, you don't have to go that far, but there's just articles everywhere. Like, the internet is amazing, and there's so many people who want to share their knowledge and experiences with you. Yeah.
That's cool. There's also, I come from an academic background, and so I have a special place in my heart for conferences. And I know that not everybody loves conferences, but I like going to them. There's a lot of really good accessibility conferences where you can learn things about, like the Parkinson's study that I was talking about, where they, you know, track motor movement on iOS. And so there's a lot of really cool innovation that gets shared at those conferences, like Kai and, oh gosh, I'm not going to be able to remember some of the accessibility focused ones. I'm sure other folks can pull me in.
CSUN is one.
CSUN, thank you.
CSUN's the big one.
CSUN's the big one, yes. And then there's one that's aimed at like teachers that talk about students and student needs. And so there's a lot of really cool innovation that happens there that always gets me excited for thinking of new ways that we can bring that knowledge back and make products better. Yes, ATIA, and thank you, Sarah Wood, in the comments. Yes. Yeah, ATIA is a good one.
Oh, yeah.
So then, you know, before I ask my next question, because y'all touched on something I want to address, but I want to make sure I'm acknowledging our audience first. Evelyn asks, hi, could you give any advice on how to get a job in accessibility and UX? I'm having trouble finding job postings for accessibility for an entry-level position.
I bet, Maureen, do you have some good insights here?
Yeah, a big thing that I did that I think helped me get here was to really formulate my LinkedIn and my materials to show that I had either background experience with the populations that I interact with now, or maybe even the research methods for accessibility. So make that LinkedIn match your accessibility interests and what you have experience in for. And also when you speak to your managers, if that's a highlight feature of your experience and your skills, definitely make that known.
I think also there's a website of mentors called UX Coffee Hours, and there's all sorts of different UX roles of people willing to chat with you to talk about how to make that transition, how to find a job. My biggest recommendation is to kind of think about all the different ways that you could get into UX besides tech. There's lots of really cool UX jobs out there. And really highlight your accessibility knowledge and then the UX specific knowledge, like Maureen was saying, in your LinkedIn and your resume. But there's also lots of, like, not necessarily, so full-time roles are great, but there's also ways to get your foot in the door, right? By doing contract roles or vendor work or even volunteer work to just show, hey, I can do UX. I did this volunteer project, and that can really help for people to understand that you have those skills that are going to translate really easily into UX if you haven't done UX before.
Yes, because we did this series from our non-technical series, and we had someone from Pinterest, Sierra, and how she got her start because she started as a copywriter. She just went on and did a lot of contract work and freelance work to kind of build her portfolio, and she was able to present it, and now she's a brand communications manager. So it just goes to show you, if you want it, do the work, it's going to come for you.
That's so cool.
And the power of the coffee chat is amazing. If you find on LinkedIn people with that accessibility tag in their headline or in their work, like that might do wonders for you.
That's so lovely. And thank you all for that advice. So kind of want to go into, before we drift too far off into the audience, but as we talked about accessibility in itself, like, what are some things that the company is doing, or rather, what are some things the leadership at the company is doing to kind of get involved, like initiatives, or, you know, how are they supporting the ERGs for, you know, accessibility?
So Google has a really, really, really active disability ERG called Disability Alliance that it's honestly one of my favorite parts of working at Google. It's just a really wonderful community of people who, you know, are all very passionate about what we're doing and about supporting each other too. You know, that mailing list is kind of a joy, even when we're talking about like heavy topics and things we want to change. And, you know, ERGs at Google do have executive sponsors, so leadership support, things like that. You know, who've been focusing on things like hiring, all those, you know, big things we really want to change. I know that Google just came out yesterday with its annual diversity report too, and we're making some strides in the disability area as well. And that's, I think, in no small part due to like Disability Alliance initiatives in partnership with leadership around hiring.
I think it's really cool to see how much leadership at Google and even other companies are really leaning into DEI stuff right now. And so I think the key is that a lot of accessibility voices have to go and say, hey, accessibility is part of DEI. You cannot have DEI without accessibility. And so if you're going to have this really cool DEI mission, let's think about how accessibility fits in there and really make them see how that all kind of ties together as part of like product inclusion and how accessibility is a chunk of that. And so really trying to capitalize on some of those leadership missions to like be more DEI focused and say like, all right, you can like say that you're DEI focused. Let's see you actually do that. And like, let's make some change in the accessibility world.
I love that.
Love it.
I love that. I want to lean into it a little bit more because I love that you said that you can't have DEI without accessibility. That was really, that's a shirt right there. Y'all might want to put that in and put Google. So how do you guys navigate pushback from like other cross-functional team members who either don't understand the importance of accessibility or don't have the capacity to advocate?
Yeah, I can maybe jump in. Definitely as a software engineer, you get a lot of people with strong opinions. I think that's, again, as an engineer, everyone's got their own opinion and everyone is very adamant that they're right. But I think just remembering that, you know, my role is like an advocate. As someone on the accessibility team, I'm an advocate for, again, the people that I'm supposed to be building for. And so just, you know, knowing that Google has a culture that allows for respectful disagreement. And if someone really is not understanding the importance of accessibility, just saying, hey, you know, respectfully, here's my position. I feel very strongly about it. And again, going back to the leadership thing, leadership has done a good job of prioritizing accessibility as well, because every feature needs to meet an accessibility standard. And so, again, you can point to that thing that leadership has implemented and say, hey, it's there for a reason and we need to meet it. And it needs to pass this standard before it can launch, for example.
And that's where I come in. That's the standard that I manage. So, you know, even still, I get pushback just trying to implement some of that, right, on the other side. And, you know, blessing and the curse that we need it, but I'm glad it's there. The ADA exists, right? So there is, you know, some legal backing here that's like, hey, this is important. Actually, the government has said this is important. So
and I'm just imagining you going up to a product team and being like, Android, I'm gonna go join them in suing you if you don't fix it.
I can get a little let's call it feisty. Sometimes.
Amazing.
You know,
we need that.
It's a last resort of, you know, pointing to a law. But
like having OKRs is essentially like the internal law, right? We have our objectives and key results and we say, hey, this is an accessibility one, you have to go do it. And so if we have nothing else, we have that to force them to do it if we can't get them to actually understand the value.
Yeah, and I'm very lucky that I'm kind of in a position, you know, I'm not a senior Googler, but because of the program that I manage, I have a little bit of pull in some places where I can speak to, you know, directors, VPs, and above on how to, you know, why this is important. If I can get their buy-in, then it kind of trickles down, like Katie was saying about like OKRs, like actual goals that we have for the quarter, for the year, etc., that teams have to try and meet. So, those can get set at a pretty high level. And once you kind of break down that door, it's essentially a mandate, right? So if we can get there, it's better.
I think another good way too, and this is true not only for accessibility or accessibility research, but also just all researchers, is there's a lot of power in finding people who are bought in and then working with them to make change, celebrating the heck out of them, telling the whole company, look at this awesome work that this team just did, and then going to other teams and saying, aren't you jealous? Don't you wish this was you? Don't you wish you were doing this good? And getting them bought in, right? Like seeing the success of other teams is going to make them want in, which is exactly how we did. I worked with the hardware team last year, where I worked with a researcher. She just started kicking out accessibility research for teams that were interested. And by the end of the year, there were teams coming to her being like, when are you going to do our product next? That looks so cool, right? And so that was like so successful for her. It was great.
Katie, you mentioned like kind of celebrating each other's wins and things, right? I think it really is so powerful to have an accomplice kind of like that, right? Like someone who will really act for you, and you can lift each other up, right? Like there might be a cool initiative that you did in accessibility, that, if someone in different ERG, they can kind of publicize your thing and back and forth, right? Because especially disability is like a super intersectional identity, right? Like any race, gender, creed can be disabled, any human being. So the sorts of things that we're doing, Sarah hit the nail on the head, right? The sorts of things we're doing affect everybody. And anyone can be disabled any day. So, having those sorts of alliances across different, marginalized identities is so important. I know, Katie, you were speaking more about across companies, but just across people and kind of building those, call them bridges, call them what have you, but communication networks, really, to kind of amplify what you're working on, what you've done. And then more people will see something like that, be like, oh, that's cool, I never thought about that. And then we circle back to what we were saying in the beginning, where it's so much easier to bake accessibility into something from the beginning instead of hacking it on with glue and string at the end. So, you never know what engineer is listening.
Oh, yes, of course. And I think the biggest thing that when y'all was going through, talking about everything, very informational, is now in tech, you have to be a constant student, right? You have to be an avid learner. But I think we think about that as more technical. What about avidly learning how to be empathetic, how to think about all marginalized communities? And I think we're so thankful for all of you here because y'all have that in your head that, hey, we need to make these products, accessible to everybody, not just, the standard, but every accessibility should be the standard for every single thing that we do. It should always come in first thing.
Yeah, I love that point about storytelling and empathy building. That's something that I focus so heavily on, and I teach all the researchers on my team is you can go in and you can probably immediately identify this won't work for someone who's blind using a screen reader. But if you have a video of a user struggling and they watch that video, that just does so much more than what my researchers can verbally say, hey, your product sucks, go fix it. But actually watching that user builds empathy, builds a better story, and gets them more motivated to act.
1,000,000%, yeah.
And that kind of segues into Meredith's question, which is, we have a little technical difficulty, but no worries. I am an elementary special education teacher. I teach students with a variety of different disabilities. When making products accessible, how do you pick which disability to focus on?
That's a good one.
Very good. Because we often forget about the children, I don't want to say we often forget about the kids, but when it comes to, we think about more adults and how to make it accessible, but what about the children? Because they have needs that aren't being met when we're not making those products be expansive for them.
Absolutely. Meredith, I used to be a special education teacher too, so just big ups. But go ahead, sorry.
I think that you have to like talk to your users, right? And see what needs aren't being met. Then again, you kind of have survivorship bias there, right? Like if people's needs aren't being met, they're not using your product. So then you really have to think holistically about it. And just this is where that knowledge of disability communities and accessibility as a whole really comes in, because after a certain amount of time, you know, one of you were saying before, like you can look at a product and know at a certain point, like that's not going to work for blind users, that's not going to work for X, Y, and Z. So if you have a feature that, you know, even with your knowledge of assistive technologies, you can kind of run through the list in your head, and is this going to work with braille display? Is this going to work with like Zoom text? Is this going to work with insert thing here? Like this can work with voice typing even, right? It's having that breadth of knowledge, right? Because it's not so much about like picking a disability to focus on. From an accessibility perspective, it's more like picking a access mode, right? So like screen readers, things like that, to be able to support. And then if you want to think bigger, we have products that we call like accessibility first products, right? So folks were talking about things like live transcribe, in like Chrome and Android now, just kind of captions everything. Live captions, I think it's live captions media, and then live transcribe is the Android app that will just transcribe anything that is being said in your environment. But those sorts of things start from a disability first, in quotes, I'm making air quotes with my fingers, perspective. And that's the sort of thing where you can, you know, pick a challenge that someone is running into because of their disability, or really because their environment is not properly accommodating their disability, and think about how you can, you know, attack that challenge from the root. And that's where you get UX researchers coming in to speak to those people and starting from scratch. I'm not a UX person, someone else can take that. But a rambling answer, but there's a lot there to think about.
From a research perspective, when I go and I partner with teams, what I try to do is figure out where are the gaps in their product, what have they already thought about or what haven't they thought about. And unfortunately, a lot of the times is they have not thought about it at all. And so we do have to focus on like all the different disabilities, all different assistive technologies, but that can feel really overwhelming. And so we usually start, to be honest, we usually start with certain disability groups that tend to be more easily understood to cross-functional stakeholders who are totally new to disability, right? So like it's really easy for cross-functional stakeholders to understand how the experience of someone who is blind is totally different. And it's a lot harder, right? There are invisible disabilities, and it's a lot harder sometimes for them to understand what does it mean for a group with cognitive disabilities, right? Or learning challenges and things like that. And so sometimes we start with the group that we think is gonna have like the most impact for them to kind of understand, yes, you need to think about disabilities. And then sometimes we'll just set up a research program that says, we're gonna go through disability groups one by one until this product works for everyone, and just kind of hack away at it over time. And then I think back to what Sarah dropped in the comments of like also thinking about the intersectionality of folks, right? And so like I've done research with other special ed teachers and research with classrooms when I was on the Chrome OS team to make sure that like, you know, check out what is students' experiences and not necessarily focused on specific disabilities, but just looking at students with disabilities, any number of them, and what does their experience on laptops look like, and how can we more broadly make that better as opposed to focusing on a specific tool or a specific user need.
That is awesome. You just brought me back to my old job. I'm thinking of all the students I had, and I'm like, wow, there's some things that can change in order to help them out and really look at that community for sure.
Yeah, and that's another great example of where accessibility features work for everyone, because we saw students using their Chromebooks all the time, and like every student would make their mouse pointer bigger so that they could use it like a finger and trace while they read, right? So it's an accessibility feature, but all the students use it and they all benefit from it, which is a really cool example of accessibility works for everyone.
Absolutely. And I love that it's starting to become more of a thing, because I feel like maybe around 2012-ish, it came a very far away. Accessibility came a very far away since that time. I'm not trying to age myself. But
don't pay her no attention. She's very young still. Don't help us, y'all.
Okay, so one of my last questions here, I know we're about to wrap up. I wanted to know if you guys at Google had any opportunities for people who do want to get into this field and learn more about it, maybe some sort of apprenticeship program or anything that anybody can apply to or find out more about how to do what you guys do over there at Google.
Definitely. I mean, internships are always a good way if you're still a student or, still haven't gotten that first job. I think internships are a great way to get going. One thing that Google's been doing is hiring accessibility analysts. Actually, it's a new role that we just kind of defined, but it's basically a hybrid of a lot of different things, but it's kind of like a accessibility focused PM almost, right? And so we have been hiring a lot of accessibility analysts. If you have any background in accessibility testing, definitely like software engineering, you could apply for that role. Or even, again, UX. I mean, I feel like it's a very just like hybrid kind of Swiss Army knife role. So that's definitely a good way. I think, again, we're still hiring a lot of those folks. And so I'd recommend it if you're interested.
Yeah, we also have a new summer role not summer role, but in addition to internships, we have student research roles now that are a little bit different from internships. They run all year. They don't have a maximum amount of time. So those are, if you're still a student, are really good. I regularly post to LinkedIn. I usually have at least one contract role open at all times and hopefully some actual full-time headcount soon. But posting to LinkedIn all the time, looking for help. And then I think I interrupted NM, so go for it.
No, you're good. I was just going to say what was I going to say? Oh yeah, just adding on to the amount of analysts that we really do need. We're scrambling to have interviewers on our side to fill the amount of interviews that we're having for analysts right now. So yeah, like Aki was saying, if you have any kind of QA experience, accessibility testing, those are the hard skills that I feel like we really require for that role. And you can see all this in the job postings that are listing. If you go to careers.google.com and you search accessibility analyst, a bunch will pop up. And a lot of them are remote as well.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
And also, I'm on UX coffee hours. I'm always happy to chat with folks trying to transition into accessibility UX, especially research. I don't know much about other UX roles, but definitely research, happy to chat about. So you can find me on there.
Look at that. Katie said, let me put my cape on real quick and save you guys really quick. Another plug. That's what we need. Mm-hmm.
And listen, I actually just connected with her a week ago. When I tell you the content on my timeline, I see her at least 3 or 4 times a day posting, sharing stuff, trying to get people involved. So she really takes this very seriously, and she tries her best to get people involved, celebrate everybody. So please connect with her if you have the opportunity.
Connect with everybody here.
Everybody, because
take that as a personal invitation.
Yes.
And it's just been an excellent talk, especially because I know how we've seen the branding of health, where mental health is health. It's kind of, I like what we're doing, what I'm seeing here from you all, which is accessibility is inclusion. Because so many times people try to separate it, but no, when you're inclusive, that means everybody. So everybody here, regardless of who you are, regardless of your background, regardless of whatever you're doing, you deserve to be in these spaces, and there are spaces here for you. And these fine people here have shown you can do whatever that you want to do, no matter what your condition is. So I hope that y'all really take the time to really say, yes, go after that dream, go after everything that you want.
Yes, love it. Amazing.
Thank you guys for coming today. We really hope to have you again back soon.
We need all y'all. I'm not gonna say hope. I'm saying we need y'all. It's something that we need to do again, because y'all have worked since space. A lot of good questions from the audience, a lot of good feedback. I need y'all back here. So what I got to put in your contract? I gotta go to Google myself. I'll do that.
We're gonna go and blow up your DMs.
Anytime. This is super fun.
Yeah, anyone here, add me on Twitter, add me on LinkedIn. I post a lot of disability, accessibility in general, effective justice content on my Twitter too. So if you're interested, maybe you don't know who to start following for, disability Twitter, I retweet a hell of a lot of people. So that's a good place to start.
So you heard her. I mean, you heard they. My apologies. You heard they. Get into it. You heard them. Get into it.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much again. We hope you have an incredible weekend, and we hope to see you guys soon. Okay.
Amazing.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you all. Nice chatting.
Thank you.
This was
Thank you.